screen, I think. Is it not?
We can see, sir.
Yes, okay, good. Yes.
Good morning, all the participants. Good morning to Professor Dr. Uday Shankar Dikshit, Professor, Department of Mechanical Engineering, IIT Guwahati. He is a eminent educationist and he has lot of teaching experience. He worked as a director CIT Kokrajhar, and he has more than 100 publications to his credit, and he works basically on metal forming, laser beam machining, finite element and optimization techniques. Now let us hear from Dr. US Dikshit about mathematical modeling of the manufacturing systems. Basically, he will talk about different modeling systems. As we know, modeling is very important in the manufacturing industry, but because a lot of processes are there where the experimentation is quite difficult and it is very expensive. And in that case, the only way to out is to predict the process and the output by mathematical modeling. So let us hear from the eminent educationist and professor about the modeling and simulation of manufacturing processes. I would request Professor US Dikshit to take over and address the audience. Thank you.
Okay. Very good morning to all the organizers and participants. Now today I have got, I think, total about 1.5 hours. In that I will be exposing you to simulation and modeling of manufacturing processes. Naturally, I cannot go depth in any one, but I will give a type of exposure so that you can get interest and you can further explore those areas. And I will be highlighting the research issues actually, which are which can be immediately taken by the researchers. You are seeing my first slide about simulation and modeling of manufacturing processes, and it is here where I am sitting, that it is academic complex, and you are getting the view of Brahmaputra, which is besides our campus. And with this, so now the question is that why do we simulate manufacturing processes? We have to simulate. Nowadays, too much emphasis is on simulation, but in even recent couple of years or so, within advent of Industry 4.0, we are talking about digital manufacturing, okay, making digital twins. Why we are doing like that? So with simulation of manufacturing processes, we can estimate the forces, loads, which help in designing machines, tools, and dies. Also, we can predict the life of the die, life of the tool, and we can estimate the product quality before manufacturing. We can predict that this will be the product quality. We can talk about the dimensional deviation, surface finish, surface integrity. We can even predict microstructure. Nowadays, too much computational work is taking place in the area of material science also. They are turning towards this one. A few decades before, in metallurgy departments, there was not much emphasis on the analytical tools and modeling, but now the scenario is changing. So you can predict microstructure as well as hardness. Now, this is a common question people ask sometimes, maybe in many interviews also, that what is the difference between simulation and modeling? Okay, so definition of simulation, let us see what do we mean actually simulation. If we see the dictionary meaning, simulation is an approximate imitation of the process. It is an approximate imitation of the processes. Here, this definition is not talking whether it is a computer simulation. It may be by some machine also. Like we have sometimes we simulate the actual experiments. Okay, if we want to simulate the situation of flood, but we arrange that in a confined room, in a scale model, that is also simulation. And another definition is that simulation is the imitative representation of the functioning of one system or process by means of the functioning of another. Okay, so if I making, suppose I have some, say, let us say there is a forging machine, and I make its everything, all the data I have put in the computer. Naturally, it was designed there. I can put all the things, and then whatever is happening on the actual machine, that I can simulate on its digital avatar. Then also it is a type of that, it is basically imitation. That means one thing is being done in the computer, another thing is being done on the shop floor. And simulation, modeling, and analysis is the process of creating and experimenting with a computerized mathematical model of a physical system. So it is this definition that which we will be following in this talk today, that it is invariably there will be computer involved. That type of simulation, modeling, and analysis we are talking. Modeling is that sometimes modeling and simulations are used together. They are like twin words. But you know, model is basically the representation of the process that provides some information about it. So model need not provide all the information. I can do only thermal modeling. So my objective is only to find out the temperatures. My objective is not to find out that what happens, the stress, etc. So then it is, or I can do mechanical modeling, or it can be combined modeling, that thermomechanical modeling. It can be microstructural modeling also. So models can be in part, and execution of model is called simulation. When you execute that model, then it will be called simulation. Now, two types of models are invariably used. One is the direct model, other is the inverse model. So I would like to emphasize that inverse models are also very important. In fact, they become very, very important in present age, when you are having the new materials and you don't know their properties. So you can find out the properties by means of these models, by inverse modeling. You can measure some parameters which can be easily measured online in the shop floor, and that data can go in the computer, and immediately that corrective action can be taken, and it can estimate what is the current process parameter. Now, let us just start, because since we are talking about modeling of manufacturing processes, so what are the various type of processes? We have machining, which comes under the area of subtractive processes. Here we subtract the material. Then metal forming, it is mass containing. Neither we remove the material nor we do addition. Similarly, casting can also be called mass containing process. Okay, here basically we, in both these processes, we change something from one phase to other phase. Of course, in casting we change the solid thing to liquid, and then we make. And here in metal forming, we do not change it to solid, but we make into the plastic form. Okay, and then after that, powder metallurgy, then joining, welding, adhesive bonding, then 3D printing, that means additive process. So all these processes are there. Typical machining processes, you have many, that you have turning this in our workshop. We have drilling, milling, electrochemical machining. Now electrochemical machining, which is covered under the, in many books, as a non-traditional process, naturally it has become like a traditional manufacturing process. Electrochemical machining, electro-discharge machining. And typical metal forming processes are this, that first metal forming processes are those processes which cause change in the shape of solid metal parts via plastic permanent deformation. And we divide it to two parts basically: bulk metal forming processes and sheet metal forming processes. Of course, we have combination also, which are nowadays called bulk sheet metal forming processes. So in bulk metal forming processes, raw material and products have a relatively high ratio of volume to surface area. So for example, you have rolling. Surface area is somewhat less, but the volume is more. It was developed somehow in something like 14th century. It was used in commercial scale. And if we talk about extrusion, extrusion was developed by Joseph Bramah in 1797. They were making those days lead pipes. Now you know that we should not make the lead pipes. because lead is very harmful substance for the health of the human being. So lead pipes should be means extinct. Still that some places lead pipes may be there, but earlier days even water supply was through lead pipes. So extrusion was used, and nowadays we can in fact extrude very high temperature materials also. Then forging, that you have open die forging where it is upsetting, and then we have precision forging, closed die forging. It was in fact in use even 10,000 years ago. So here in closed die forging, you compress it, and then it will be totally confined, material will be confined in the die, and some part of it will come out, that is called flash. It has to be trimmed. But nowadays in precision forging, because of the proper modeling, that flash can be minimized or almost it can be eliminated. Then you have got wire drying. It is just the pulling off wire or rod through conical dies or through any type of means profile of the die may be of different type. In fact, there is reference to wire drying even in Old Testament of Bible also. So that means it is a very old process. In sheet metal forming process, raw materials and products have relatively low ratio of volume to surface area. So here our primary purpose is not to change the thickness of the sheet, although the thickness of the sheet also will get automatically changed. Now just see that we are doing deep drying process here. There is, I have applied blank holder force, and then after that there is a die radius and all these, and there is some clearance between punch and die. All these things will affect the quality of the product. In fact, if you apply very low amount of blank holder force, then you may get wrinkling, and if you apply too much force, then you will get tearing. So that means if you do, you can eliminate a lot of hit and trial experiments if you do proper modeling of this thing. And even the property of raw material property also has effect. If the sheet is having lot of planar anisotropy, if the properties are different in different direction in a plane, you get one defect called earring. It's like human ear you get on the sheet that surf edges. These type of defects can be eliminated. Now it is, so these are the type of traditional metal forming processes, but there are now emerging somewhat non-traditional metal forming processes also. Like here in our IIT Guwahati also we have done such type of experiments, that here we are deforming the material only by heating through a laser. So and it's even the thickness, you see that its thickness is very much. But the thing, if I do it by mechanical bending, there are chances of cracks here on the back side, but here there is no crack. Even this is a brittle material which has been bent by laser forming, because due to temperature its nature got changed. If I do it at cold temperature, then there will be cracks. And then I am making different type of shapes. I can make cup, in fact, and so this was just by heating. There is no contact at all. You can do that forming during, after the assembly also. In any inaccessible area, you cannot take your whole machine and die and punch, but you can take your laser torch only there, and it can be done. So then we tried even laser assisted bending. Assisted means that it is primary process is not that done by the laser. Laser is only heating and changing the properties locally, and bending is done mechanically here. So laser, then there is a laser origami. Origami is basically a Japanese word. It is means art of paper folding. So they make various things by paper. Now laser origami means that if there is a sheet, I can make it in different forms, and which can be suitable, and then finally there is no need to cut and machine, and we can make complicated structures. Apart from this, nowadays there is a trend that traditionally we have been thinking that metal forming is the process which will change raw material into a product form by means of plastic deformation. But another application of metal forming can be this, that is to improve the properties of the material metal. Here I will not be changing the shape, just I will be changing. Suppose I will refine my grain structure. My grains will become ultra fine, and they will be even they will be less than 1 micron size, and due to that the properties will increase. Maybe its yield strength may increase by even 2 times, 3 times. So these are called severe plastic deformation processes. That means we are only doing the plastic deformation to improve the quality. So this one is that equal channel angular extrusion. Here what I am doing, that it is a extrusion process only. I just took a billet and did pass through a die. This die angle is 90 degree, so it just changes. So there is a 90 degree shear angle, and after that again I will repeat the process many times. So I will get lot of strain. It will cause severe plastic deformation. Ultimate shape remains same. Then high pressure torsion, I will have a small, suppose disc raw material, and then this is one anvil which is stationary, other anvil is rotating, but at the same time it is putting pressure. So I am putting the pressure and torsion together, and due to that there is a severe plastic deformation created, and its microstructure gets changed. And similarly, another one is related to rolling. This is called accumulative roll bonding. In this, that what happens, that if I take some thickness, let us say thickness is 10 mm, and I pass through the rolls, thickness becomes 5 mm and length becomes double if it is a plane strain rolling. And then after that, I cut it into 2 pieces, again put one above the other in this side, input side. So it is, that means thickness again becomes this one, and again I pass through the roll. Then these sheets will get bonded, and again there will be reduction. This process I can repeat several times. So there will be, of course, lot of interfacial bonds, but you know that finally the product shape and size remains same, and in the process you are introducing lot of strain. This has to be done very carefully. We try to do here at our place that now we get some difficulty, that you know that if the surfaces are not properly smooth, then the bonding will not be proper, and bonding strength will be less. So these are the issues. Other issues is that suppose you have high pressure torsion, etc., and they have been extensively done in the lab scales. I know that in several IITs, several groups in metallurgy department as well as in mechanical department, they are doing this thing, but they are doing at lab scale. So you have to commercialize. If they can be made at bigger scale in bigger machines, then these process can be very useful, because I have seen that even the in the literature up to 3 times increase in the yield strength has been achieved by means of severe plastic deformation processes. Another process that I would like to say that was of course developed in 1907, that is hydraulic autofrettage. But this imparts basically the residual stresses. There is a difference between severe plastic deformation and autofrettage. In the autofrettage, basically I am producing the residual stresses on the surface. Okay, I can increase the strength of the material by strain hardening, and by means of that, you know, microstructural changes. But I can also increase by putting the residual stresses. If I put the compressive residual stresses on the surface, then they can improve the fatigue strength also. So what happens that in this one, that hydraulic autofrettage produces the compressive residual stresses inside, and outside we have got maybe some small amount of tensile residual stresses. So this type of process is also done. We developed here in about 2014, we have done extensive experiments on the thermal autofrettage. Basically the thermal autofrettage, we are producing the same residual stresses by means of the thermal means. Because this point has to be remembered, that here the strengthening process is not due to strain hardening, but main strengthening is due to residual stresses. Like we have even shot peening, that you know we inject a lot of balls on the surface, just to induce the compressive residual stresses. So what I am doing that here, I am just flowing the water through the that thick cylinder, and outside I am heating, and then I am getting the residual stresses. And in fact, recently I was telling to my PhD student he should do some rotational autofrettage, but meantime that he could not do, and after 2 years I saw that this was done by some person, I think in UK, and he has done something about rotational autofrettage, that where we are producing due to rotation of the cylinder, we are producing the residual stresses. So these are the different type of processes. Now generally the detailed objectives of any modeling and simulation will be many, that you can focus on any one aspect. One is the power requirement. This has in fact quite a bit matured, that most of the even traditional books give that expressions that how you can estimate power, pressure in the dies and tool, stress, strain and strain rate distributions in the material during processing. That means I want complete detail. This is also achieved easily using the finite element method. Residual stresses in the product, although difficult to model, but it is also has been accomplished to some extent in finite element packages. Also, there are lots of issues. You get a lot of errors actually in this. Even the measurement of residual stresses is not that an easy task. Then defects, you can even predict defects, geometric accuracy, then surface integrity, and mechanical and metallurgical properties and microstructure. So thermomechanical and microstructural modeling has to be done together. Now briefly I summarize these traditional techniques, because when we talk about the modeling and even in the simulation, suppose you want to make a good simulation package which can do the things, maybe it can be used for actual designing in the shop floor, or maybe it may be educational package. The idea is that always it is not necessary to use finite element method. So there are various methods which are very fast in predicting the result, and maybe in some cases with some relaxation of assumptions, you can get accuracy as much as in the finite element method. Then why not use those methods, because they also give the physical feel, and they are computationally very fast. So we should not throw away those methods, although most of the times nowadays we are not using them. So one method is very old, that is called SRAB method. It was used extensively in 1923, 20s, and after that it is contained in the traditional books. All the books of say manufacturing science, they will contain these methods. And say for example that we just take a slab of the material and we do force balance and we develop these equations and we solve that. But this has been used even in the recent times also, like the asymmetric rolling has been modeled using SRAB method. Asymmetric rolling is that this process that which is also emerging, that this is used for not only for maybe producing the curved sheets and also producing the reducing the load, but also improving the microstructure. In this, what happens that there will be some asymmetry. Okay, so this may be due to different size of the rolls, or maybe rolls may be of the same size, but the friction may be different on one side and it may be the other way on the other side. So you have got, suppose upper roll, you are getting a neutral point here, but in the bottom roll you are getting a neutral point here. So there is a class shear zone type of thing, that here this one before this new position, both these things are in both the surfaces, friction is moving in the appearing in this side, but in this one class zone, that it is there is a lot of shearing. So this shearing produces some changes in the property. So this type of thing, now you can make a, you can take a slab of material and you can do the force balance. Usually in the traditional rolling process, we assume that the stresses are uniform, but here we can introduce, because with the help of computers, we can still use the SRAB method, but still use the computer, and we can say that, okay, stress distribution we can assume. So I assume that stress distribution is linear here. and it is like that. So, and this one. So with this, when you model, you do the force and momentum balance, actually you will be getting three equations: fx, sigma fx equal to 0, fy equal to 0, and sigma m0 equal to 0. These three differential equations you can simultaneously solve by using any method of solving the coupled ODE ordinary differential equations are this one. So in these equations, you can use even Runge-Kutta method, and there are many such methods. So this type of thing is called SLAB method, which is still being used. Other method was very popular once upon a time, that is called slip line method, because it used a lot of physical feel. Because in most of the ductile materials, it is believed that the deformation takes place due to slippage. Okay, even dislocations are there, but dislocations slip. So we assume that whenever there is a maximum shear stress along that direction, there is a slippage. And but this method is usually applicable for plane strain problems, although the researchers have tried to use it for axisymmetric problems also, with some assumptions, some limitations. But in essence, slip line method is basically solving these type of equations. You have to satisfy some yield criteria, although due to, if you do numerically, it is with the help of computer, it is also possible to take into account the strain hardening. But most of the traditional slip line solutions are for rigid plastic material. They don't assume any strain hardening. So here we can use either Tresca criteria, or we can use von Mises criteria, and we have to write the equilibrium equations. It is essential that in most of that metal forming processes, if we are achieving the deformation through mechanical loading, then you have to always satisfy these equations. They are basically again Newton's law. Basically, they are, you can say, either Newton's or Euler's laws of motion. So, but the thing, I am not talking about inertia term, so you are not seeing the inertia term, but we are doing the force balance and we get the equilibrium equations. Okay, and then continuity equations means, because I assume that basically it is a mass conservation, and I assume that the volume also is not changing, so I get continuity equation. And then we have, when we use slip line solution, we also assume that the principal directions for the stresses and strain rate will be same. That means in whichever direction there is a maximum principal stress, in the same direction there will be maximum principal strain, because most of the materials, this will be the procedure. But you know that this may fail in now newer type of material, so just you have to be alert about that. So naturally we have got 5 equations, and we have got 5 unknowns: sigma x, sigma y, tau x, y, and Vx, Vy, velocity components. So this one can be done analytically, but slip line is invariably a graphical type of method. Same thing we are solving by means of the slip line, and we say this is one slip line, alpha line, other is beta line, and on each one there is a, each plane on the slip line there is a pressure acting, and there is a shear stress, that is K. That K is the yield stress of the material. We can draw the mole circle and we can do that. Then equation of, we use, they are all based on that, you know, equilibrium equations. We have some equations, that is Hanke's equation, that is P plus 2K phi is equal to constant along alpha line, P minus 2K phi is constant along beta line. That means if the slip line is turning, then the pressure will be changing, and similarly we can find out the velocity. So typically, say for example, you are doing the punch problem, you can construct the slip line. Now the slip lines can be constructed in a heuristic way, or they can be constructed in analytical way. Say for example, we can say that in this plane there is no vertical stress, so therefore this must be one principal plane, and therefore the shear stress should be at 45 degrees. Like these type of logics you can put, and you can actually do the construct the slip line field for the indentation of, suppose, semi-infinite medium by a punch, and then you do the analysis and you can get that punch load will be 2K 1 plus pi by 2. So then they have been used, in fact, in machining also. In machining they used that suppose this is a chip and this shearing is taking place, they assume that this is the plastic zone and this is maximum shear is along this direction, so it must be a slip line. And 90 degree to it will also be a slip line. So based on that, they obtain these type of expressions. This one done in something like in 50s and 60s. And but even now, there are some papers. Say, for example, this is a good journal, International Journal of Mechanical Sciences. This paper has been published recently in 2017, Theoretical Prediction of Machining Induced Residual Stresses in Three-Dimensional Oblique Milling Processes. In this work, stresses in the hand zone are evaluated using slip line field. So that means, although these techniques are very old, and nowadays in favor of FEM, those techniques have become almost extinct. But even then you can make use of that. So it is worth paying some attention to that. Similarly, there is a technique that which is extensively discussed in the Hill's book in 1950. This is called upper bound method. This gives very quick estimate, and this can be a very handy practical method. In this method calculates the greatest possible load that a metal forming can deliver or sustain. In this process, what happens that suppose you are doing metal forming, you assume the hypothetical velocity field that your process can be going this way. It may not be the real flow, but based on that you find out the stresses, etc. And then you develop that if there are some discontinuities, at that point you say that power due to shear discontinuity, you consider the friction effect also. With all these you calculate the power, that means hypothetical power. So this hypothetical power that which you have got, it will be always more than the actual power. Maybe intuitive understanding will be like this, because the most of the natural systems, they actually try to minimize the power consumptions. So that means that this is so that is why upper bound method becomes very handy, that you can just, you have to assume a suitable velocity field and you can do that. Similar to upper bound method, in fact, the lower bound method is also there. In this, you don't assume any velocity field, but you assume a type of stress field. So in this, what happens that when body is yielding and you consider that plastic deformation is taking place, and based on hypothetical stress field, then you calculate the power, etc. Then what will happen that this power will be less than the actual power. So if you do both upper bound and lower bound analysis, you can get an estimate of that, this one. But these techniques, of course, have many limitations, because here you are talking about only finding out the power, but you are interested in finding out many other things. This can be, in fact, they used even for finding the defects. In that, the procedure is like that. They make one sound product. They assume that this may be the velocity field, and they assume that in a defective product, what will be the velocity field. And if the defective field gives less power, that means deformation is likely to take place that way and defect will be formed. So these type of things have been done. And then long back, this procedure was also very much used. That is visioplasticity method. Visioplasticity, that means visual examination. So we make a grid type of thing. Even now also when we do that forming limit diagrams, etc. on the sheet, we make some grids, and after that we see the deformation. So in this case, that during the deformation, we can keep some high-speed camera and we can take photographs. So I can see that visually that how the deformation is taking place, and then I can find out the strain rate, stresses and strain field, and then after that we can do the analysis. And this method has, but nowadays, limited applications. So with the advent of FEM, all these techniques have lost importance. FEM was used for modeling of metal forming processes since about 1970s. And typically in the FEM finite element method is basically a method of solving numerical method of solving the differential equations. So basically, like you have continuity equations. So we can say continuity equations, okay, in 3 dimensions. Then you have equilibrium equations. I have used index notations. If you read nowadays new papers, they will invariably use index notation and even Einstein summation convention. But I am not going to detail about that. These are equilibrium equations. Then strain rate velocity relations. Then strain displacement relations and constitutive relations. All these things we do. And then there are 2 approaches to do finite element analysis, 2 main approaches. And using the different combinations of these 2, we have hybrid approaches also. One is the Lagrangian formulation, in which we focus on each and every particle that the formation is taking place, how it is going. So it is a type of control mass approach. And other approach is the Eulerian approach. This is also called flow formulation. It is something like water is flowing through a pipe and I am only seeing the pipe. So at any instant of time, there will be some particle, but after some time, another particle will come and this process goes on. So these 2 formulations are used and they have got pros and cons. In the updated Lagrangian formulation, at time t equal to 0, if a particular particle at p, then it goes to p dash at t is equal to tau, and after that it is going at tau plus delta t. So you have got a particle path. Like that you have the particle path for all the particles. And this you know that computer can keep tracking. In the finite element method, there may be some discrete particles, that means there may be some nodes, and computer is basically tracking those nodes, and after that in between it will do interpolation. So these type of things are there. Reference configuration is this. This is called total Lagrangian formulation, but you can also do it increment wise, that when you are talking about this position, then you only take the reference as the previous position. That will be called updated Lagrangian formulation. So in modern day finite element packages, these terms are used, that updated Lagrangian formulation or Eulerian formulation. So you can be familiar with that. So updated Lagrangian formulation is that type of formulation. Suppose there is a car. Now this car is going in the road. You follow that where it is going. This auto is going in a different direction. You have to follow it also. And your truck is going in different way. Like that, wherever they are going. So your mesh will naturally keeps distorting, because initially something was straight. After that, its curvature has changed. It has become curved. So your mesh also has to change. All these type of difficulties are there. It takes a lot of computational time. That is the only drawback of this one. In fact, I would tell that our typical idea that we did finite element simulation of the laser bending, etc. One simulation is taking about 8 hours, 7 hours, like that. So you have to do something. So difficulties are more computational time, and sometimes residual stresses are not predicted properly due to accumulation of computational errors. You have to worry about that also. It is easier said than done. A lot of difficulties are behind the screen, but finally you get a nice simulation. But difficulties are there, and difficulty in applying special boundary conditions. Eulerian formulation is like this type of formulation, that you have got a, suppose, bridge. You just stand in the bridge and see that what is happening in the bridge, who is passing through that. This type of formulation is also called flow formulation, and we find out velocities and hydrostatic stress. So we talk in terms of the strain rate, and we have the Lévy-Mises plastic flow rule that relates the strain rate to deviatoric stress. And then we have got, this is a non-linear problem. It is like a flow problem, like we solve Navier-Stokes equation, but here it is a non-linear, non-Newtonian flow. And then you can, of course, take into account that flow stress, sigma y, will have some strain hardening effect. It may have temperature effect. And these are the continuity and equilibrium equations. And so many researchers, they solve using the Galerkin formulation. and sometimes there is some difficulty because in fact in one equation there is a pressure term, other equation there is not a pressure term. So people use some penalty type of formulation. They say that suppose continuity equation is this much plus P by lambda, that hypothetically they are introducing a penalty, and lambda ideally it should be infinity, but they take some finite value, and then there are mixed pressure velocity formulations, but you get equations which are basically very ill conditioned. So flow formulation has nevertheless been extensively used for wire drawing, extrusion, rolling, like it is a flat rolling problem, and we have got the mesh, and we are doing this one, and then we get these type of equations. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you only have to solve only the simultaneous equations. So your accuracy is much dependent on how fast you can solve these simultaneous equations with that means accuracy as well as the speed. And this solution methods, there are a lot of people who do research that what efficient method can be used for solving these simultaneous equations, because this matrix will contain a lot of zeros. And sometimes you get a pressure, but we have noted that we get a spurious amount of pressure because there is no derivative of pressure involved in the equation. So you get some pressure times constant, and also you see that if epsilon dot ii is very, very small and this is very large, theoretically epsilon dot ii should be 0, lambda should be 0, so infinity into 0 becomes indeterminate. So this type of problems are there. So we did computed pressure by some finite difference type of method, and after obtaining some solution, we again go back to solve the basic equations and try to reduce the error. And we also have used basically the neural network here to ease into our formulation problem, because what happens that once we have to take derivatives, etc. Now, if you take the derivatives by finite element method, they will be very inaccurate. So you take that this one and then you differentiate and you get this one. So in this what we did, that after we are seeing that earlier we were getting the results like this earlier model, that dotted line, but now the results are coming very fine. That means they are well matching with the experiments. Similarly, here the results for the another roll torque is also shown like this. So there is a lot of improvement. Earlier you were getting the results like this even by finite element. Other researchers were also getting like this, but now we improved and we are getting more accurate results. Even the same thing happens about the other materials. We have to test it in different materials because the properties will be different. And then we also tested that pressure distribution. So if we find out the pressure distribution by our original model and this model, and then after that we find out by SRAB method, we see that here the results are becoming somewhat different. So some points regarding estimation of secondary quantities. See, finite element method usually gives the nodal values, and then after that you find out the stresses and you find out temperatures, etc. So now there are a lot of final issues which can affect the accuracy. That suppose you have to find out the load. Let us say you have to find out forging load. You are doing the forging, you got the velocity field, you can find out the strain rate. After that you can find out the stresses. Now if you integrate those stresses, you can find out the force. You integrate the stresses on the surface. Other way is that you can find out the total power dissipated. And then once the power is known, then power divided by velocity, because the punch is giving all the power, it is compressing, all that upper die is coming and compressing the forging material, and it is coming like this. So you can say force into velocity is equal to power. So you can find out the forces by means of the integration of stresses, and also you can find out by energy variance. Now which approach will give good result? it is noted that the energy balance approach will give correct result, because in one you are dependent only on these surface stresses, and if there is error in the surface stresses, you will get huge amount of error, whereas in the another you are dependent on whole amount of the bulk of the material, and moreover when you integrate something, then the errors get reduced, and when you differentiate, errors accumulate. Subtraction increases the error, addition reduces the error. Suppose I take that 10 data, and in each data there are random errors. So when I will be adding them together in the total sum, some errors will be positive and some negative, and the effect will be nullified. But if I subtract two quantities, let us say I have taken one quantity and another quantity is this, I measure two displacements, and then based on that I am obtaining the velocity. You can imagine that there may be huge amount of error, because there in one error can be on positive side, in the other it can be on negative side. So these points become very, very important sometimes. Similarly, calculation of normal stresses through FEM. You can obtain these stresses by means of that proper analysis of the displacements, or once you have obtained the normal stress, then you can find out shear stress. Ts is equal to F times Tn. So should I find Ts by this equation or directly from stress components? Again, there are final points, because shear stress is a small quantity compared to normal stress. So a small amount of error in shear stress will have huge amount of error effect, percentage error. On the other hand, if you find out based on the normal stress, error may be less. So these are some results. Suppose we did wire drawing and we compared with experimental results. Sometimes if you do not take care numerical results, then you may get very strange results. See, this is some result by my colleague, and it is in some paper. Here in the roll torque, has been plotted with respect to friction. Now here it is shown that as the friction increases, initially the torque is increasing, but after that it is decreasing, and it is almost going towards zero. And that time the researcher concluded that maybe it has some effect and all that type of things. There should be optimum amount of friction. Otherwise, if you increase the friction, then torque. But this is counterintuitive, and later on precise analysis depicted that this happened due to numerical problems. So numerical aspects can be very important. Now let us talk about that. Suppose by doing the finite element analysis, other than roll force, roll torque, etc., or in wire drawing, if you find out drawing force, other than that, what it can tell, that finite element method can give some extra information. So suppose we plot the strain rate contours here, we observe that in this one particular setting, I observed that here this zone was quite narrow, that here the plastic zone was this much, but on the bottom for this particular parameters. And then later on I analyzed that if this zone becomes too narrow, almost it may become like elastic. So this portion is elastic, but the upper portion is plastically deformed. So this situation is prone to give some defect like central rust, in which there will be cracking on the inside surface. So this type of phenomena can be there, and this occurs if you have high die angle and low reduction. So if you have high die angle and low reduction, this type of phenomena is observed. So by observing such type of flow pattern or deformation pattern, you can predict the defect and you can get some idea. So similarly, that if you do the temper rolling process, in temper rolling process we do very less amount of reduction. Only the purpose is to reduce only the softness of the material. That means you just want to make it hard, and you want to impart that good surface finish. So in that process also we observe that there is some elastic zone in between, and which may create problem. Now talking about that, when you are modeling these processes, then you have to model the friction very properly. Friction will have huge impact, and particularly in the case of microfarming processes, effect of the friction will be even more, because as you have already attended a talk by Professor Amitava Ghosh about the scaling large, etc. So here, as you maybe reduce the size, your surface area becomes much, and the volume is small in comparison to that. So whatever happens at the surface may become very important for you, which was not important at macro level. So friction is one such effect, which is basically the surface effect. So it has to be modeled very carefully. It has been observed that Winningham and Bay in 70s, they have given this type of model, that what happens that if you have low amount of the normal pressure, then this behaves like a Coulomb's coefficient of friction, but after that it becomes like a constant shear, and in between there is a transition zone. So these type of behaviors, they analyze this problem by means of the strip line solution. Okay, and similarly we have done recently some lot of experiments on the rolling, and we saw that what is the effect of the temperature, and the effect of the temperature on friction in metal forming is controversial. If you see different type of publications, you may get different. Somebody will say with temperature the friction coefficient got increased, and some will say that it got decreased. Why they have different type of results? Because friction is not dependent on one thing. Friction is actually dependent on many things, and sometimes what happens that if you take the virgin material, the frictional phenomena may be quite different, but you know that there is oxide formation, and a film is getting deposited, that changes the scenario. So friction is very complicated subject, but it is worth studying friction also. I am nowadays doing some project with a Russian professor, and on this aspect only. So there are many things that, you know, there are thermal aspects, tool temperature, workpiece temperature, etc. Then there are material aspects, what is the surface topography, flow stress, grain size. Then there are chemical aspects. Then there is a tool geometry, spring back, tooling aspects. Then whether you are giving ultrasonic assisted vibration, even ultrasonic assisted vibrations effect has been reported in a different ways in different type of publications. So there are many issues with the friction, and even in the machining, suppose this is the typical stress distribution in the tool, but the friction may be having two zones. One is the sticking zone, other is the sliding zone. Then there is a effect of anisotropy. Anisotropy will also change the behavior, and anisotropy is a very important parameter. In sheet metal, we define planar anisotropy, in which the properties are different in different directions in the same plane, and normal anisotropy means that property in the plane will be different than in the thickness direction. So in the deep drying processes, sometimes we require normal anisotropy, but we do not require planar anisotropy. And then finding out the residual stresses in metal forming, etc., is very challenging, and this we have tried to do. And nowadays many packages, I have noted that they are giving sometimes not correct result. So you have to be very careful in using the packages. In fact, I have seen that there are standard packages like even Deform, and many people have modeled in Abacus. Many times, many researchers in fact have reported some results, and they reported only those results which were very convenient. Even my students was doing this type of things. I said, stop doing this thing. We will not publish these type of results, because what happened that very nice things came, and he said that, okay, cutting force is coming predicted. But then I said, what is the thrust force? Now in the thrust force, there is a huge amount of error. And then he showed me some previous papers. They also, in a very clever way, they did not publish the results on the thrust force, etc. So what I am telling, that in the simulation, etc., also there are a lot of issues, and therefore whenever you use these packages, you be careful and you see it from all angles, and then only you use it. Now thermal modeling is also a part of that thing. So we have, suppose it is a typical, suppose you have to do warm roll, flat rolling, and in that you can have deformation module and thermal module. It can be done in sequential way. That means first you find out the deformation, then take that data, then obtain the temperature, and this process you can keep repeating, or you solve these processes, means both the phenomena you consider together, and you have a coupled model. So you can have constitutive equation, friction model, and then you predict a strip temperature, slip, and all those type of things, and you do that. Then using the proper material modeling becomes very important. Nowadays you can make use of the big data in having the proper model. Need not give any empirical model, I guess, nowadays, because computer can take the raw data, and it can usually, it can by means of database modeling, it can immediately make use of those values. But earlier days, because when the computers were not those powerful, people used to take a lot of data and then they tried to fit a type of model. And that is why so many models came. Like this is Hanuman law, you know very well, you will keep using K, epsilon, n. Now what will happen that it you less amount of error at one place, but it will you more amount of error at other place. So maybe nowadays in computer, you need not do one single equation. You can use, suppose, maybe 50 equations in that given domain. In each zone, the material behavior is different. But I am just highlighting that there are a lot of models. In some models, temperature effect is also coming. And in some models, there is a effect of that strain rate is coming. Some is power law type of model. This is very popular Johnson-Cook type of models. It is widely used in machining. Strain and strain rate are usually taken plastic. And then you can also do by modeling, you can find out the quality of the product, suppose flatness of rolled sheets. So this is what can be done, and you are predicting the curvature, etc. So this type of thing we have done using stripe method, and then compared with FEM. Modeling of foil rolling, this will produce additional challenge. Very thin, ultra thin sheets are there. Now its modeling cannot be the same way that as the traditional modeling. A lot of elastic zone is there, a lot of effect of the elastic deformation is there, and there will be sticking region. All these type of things are there. And then as I talked about inverse modeling, that sometimes you can find out the parameters in inverse manner. So here that I have this rolling mill I got fabricated by MTech student at IIT Guwahati only. So this was fabricated, and then we put that camera and IR temperature sensors. So I am measuring the strip velocity and temperature, and based on this information, I am trying to predict the friction and sometimes material properties, etc. also. So you can take, in fact, a lot of data, lot of sensors can be put, and you can use sensor fusion technology to get the data and put that. And so you can, after that, we verified the experimentally, we have predicted the flow stress by inverse method and compared it with the experimental results. Okay. And since 2000, after one book was written by one researcher, Liu, and that is called Moving Beyond FEM, meshless method, in 2000. And they developed meshless method because mesh distortion and all those difficulties are there. So a lot of meshless methods are developed. I just tell their name, that reproducing kernel particle method, corrected smooth particle hydrodynamics, element-free Galerkin methods, radial basis function collocation method. My students also have used some this type of methods where you have got some nodes and you don't have any mesh, and you are seeing the typical contours, you are studying the deformation. But what I must tell, that these methods are taking a lot of time, and there are a lot of practical issues. They may look very attractive, but there are a lot of challenges. So I could not find, so even after 2000, now it is 2020, in 20 years also, the meshless method could not outperform FEM because of this problem actually, that they are computationally very much time taking and there are some numerical errors associated and this one. So nowadays, one thing can be of course done easily and people have started, this trend has started, that we can do that, increase the computational efficiency by hybrid methods. That means, for example, in early say 2000 only, early 2000, I wrote a paper on neural network assisted FEM model. So what my scheme is that suppose you do that lot of FEM modeling and you get velocity field and location of neutral point, and then you can train a neural network. Then this trained neural network, anytime it can predict the velocity field and location of neutral point, and FEM can be used only for fine tuning the result. So mostly the job is done by the neural network, and this will take very less amount of time. So this type of hybrid approach can be adopted. Similarly, I am telling that some AI-based methodology, it can be implemented. In fact, the shop floor also, artificial intelligence-based method, that suppose I have to operate some thing, and let us say that I have got one parameter, which may be some speed, okay, maybe tool speed or speed of the laser head moving, and I am just giving only example. So I have taken only one parameter in block diagram. So suppose I guess the speed and I put it in a FEM module, but I get some results which may not be as per our expectation. So I optimize it. That means I do this process again and again. In optimization, you have to do a lot of simulations, but you don't throw away those results. Those simulated data, if it is stored in some place, so it will make a good data bank. Once the good data bank has become, then your AI module will become intelligent and you will start learning again and again. So this process can be applied, and this is the essence of that. So I used it even for in laser-based farming and even in machining. Many places I have used it, and my students find that this approach is very effective. That, you know, suppose I was taking one simulation was taking 6 hours, and I had to do in the beginning, if I wanted to guess something, that I wanted that I need this precise angle, what should be my parameters, I had to do 8 trials. So it took total 48 hours. But now what happened, that after I did 15 different jobs, different type of jobs. Sometimes it took 8 hours, then 6 hours. Gradually, that lot of database I got, and then prediction is taking only one simulation, because that lot of information is already contained. So that means, because you know that optimization, unlike FEM, which is a very neat and clean method and which gives that result, and if I do FEM and you do FEM properly, you and me are expected to get almost the same result. And if we are using the same machine, we will be getting almost the same type of time also. But optimization is very risky sometimes. That's why people, when they compare the optimization algorithm, GA is better than simulated annealing and this, that, then I am very skeptical about that. Why? Because in optimization, there is very important thing is that you have to take one guess value. And moment you change the guess value, your results may change. If your guess value is close to solution, you may take only 5 iterations. But if guess value is vague, it may take more. So therefore, you can always do that. So if already we know that proper guess value, my time gets reduced. So this can be done by means of the data-based modeling, by making one artificial intelligence module. There can be several ways of doing that. You can make expert system. So this is another result. See, in the beginning, it was taking 7 iterations. Even students used to face difficulty. So I had to run, and then only I can do experiments. After that, when I said that you keep the database, that information became this one guiding tool for them, and then it took this one. So it is a simple concept, but it takes this one. Now, finally, coming to the microstructural modules, because microstructural modeling. Nowadays, it has become very essential that you should model the material behavior, because and I nowadays I am doubting, particularly in micro farming, etc., micro machining, etc., that in many materials, whether the Tresca and Van Mises model are applicable. In fact, Van Mises model has been used extensively in metal farming. But this may not be applicable at all. Suppose you are doing magnesium, for example. It has got hexagonal closed-packed structure. Aluminium has got FCC structure. So behavior of the deformation is totally different. Their slipping is dominant, and in this hexagonal closed-packed twinning deformation may become prominent. So micro models naturally also have to change. Earlier days, mechanical engineers were not bothering at all about the microstructural aspects, and they used to model believing that everything is correct. In fact, I have seen in 90s a lot of research was done. Even in IIT Kanpur, people were doing die optimization. Okay, so what is the objective function? That they say we want to minimize the power. Okay, power minimization. There used to be a single objective. Now the question is that you minimize the power, and maybe the die force also got reduced, and therefore this one. But what happened to the product quality? Product quality may become this one, because what we used to say that how they used to optimize, they said that if we do ideal deformation, only this much power is needed. But since there is a lot of curvature in the die, or there is a lot of bending inside the die, so a lot of work has to be done. So you eliminate them, optimize that there should be smooth flow of material, then power will be this. And redundant work, so-called redundant work, they used to call it redundant work, that redundant work will be eliminated. And what used to happen, that redundant work, what we call redundant work may not be redundant, actually it may be useful work, because that redundant work increases the hardness of the material. So hardness of the material may get improved, and this type of, so we have practically done. In fact, my student Dr. Ratnakar Das was doing that on multi-hole extrusion process, and when he noted that he made that many holes simultaneously, lot of products were coming, it increased the productivity, it also reduced this one, but the quality of the products, that means hardness of the product, was less compared to that when you are doing single extrusion. So many type of this type of phenomena are possible. So therefore microstructural modeling must be carried out. And if you have hard deformation process, how it can be done? It's not difficult, because nowadays mechanical, it can be easily done. So I am just giving some exposure that how my students are now doing the microstructural modeling, and combining it with FEM, micro and micro together. Now in microstructural modeling, it depends on the temperature. It is a time temperature transformation diagram, TTT diagram. So depending on what is the time, what is the temperature, you have got such type of diagrams. This data usually has to come from experiments, and you have to obtain those values. But then if you can do proper thermal analysis, you can do the analysis that at this temperature, how much time was there, and how much fraction of the crystal phase transformation was there at this temperature, how much was here at this temperature, how much fraction was here at this temperature. Like that you can take the cumulative effect, and when it will form the mountainside, then all those things can be coupled in this one. My students used Abacus package for doing the stress analysis and temperature deformation, but then what they did, that they wrote a subroutine. It is possible to write the subroutines, and they can be integrated, and they can predict this one. So for example, we are doing this in suppose ANSYS, and we are getting this one, and we are getting the inside information that how the bend angle is taking place, and what was the top surface, bottom surface. We are getting a lot of clues here, but then we are also using kinetics of diffusion-based transformation, and typically there is one classical equation that is called JMAC equation, Johnson, Mail, Avrami, Kolmogorov paper, and here they say that phase transformation may take place, or even grain refinement may take place following this type of law. And here BK and NK, they are of course the constant. They have to be determined empirically or by given experimental data. So basically, you have to write subroutine. There will be mechanical module which will find out the stresses, etc., and it will do input to thermal module, and then there will be metallurgical module. Metallurgical module will do calculations. It will do latent heat information here. Phase transformation information will come to so temperature will give idea about phase transformation, and when there is a phase transformation, then latent heat is also generated. That will go there. So like that, there is always interaction. Transformation, suppose metallurgical transformation is taking place. So suppose there is a grain growth, and it may produce some plasticity. So these type of things are there. So you have to, of course, understand a particular material. It is very difficult to develop only one model for all materials, because metallurgical effect you cannot model that way. Mechanical and thermal is all right, more or less you can say large of heat transfer are valid, even for aluminum as well as steel. But metallurgical behavior will be drastically different. But then we modeled some hardness distribution in laser irradiated sheets. We are heating the sheets, and then we are seeing that after bending, what is the hardness. And we got very good amount of prediction by metallurgical modeling. So you see that this is our experimental data, and this is the even simulation. That graph is showing that there is matching. Then we also predicted the phase fraction. We are telling that how much percentage is benite, how much percentage is ferrite, all those type of things. So all these things can be done even in machining also. You can do the microstructural modeling, and it is this one. So let us summarize in the machining. Machining research is in fact not that much matured as the metal forming, because machining, in fact, modeling of machining is in fact more challenging. But people have rather in a way given up, that they thought, okay, up to this much it can be done. Because 1940s Merchant's analysis, which was just only, it should be we respected only because of this, that it is the first, probably the first analysis which uses some trigonometry and mathematics, algebra. But otherwise, it is not important at all. Then 1950s, slip-line field solutions, analytical models. Then 1970s, they started using finite element method. I am telling that, claiming that even now, finite element methods are not giving satisfactory answer, and they are taking too much computational time. So you know that how do they model that? When they model that machining process, I say that what is the thickness you have taken, even though the thickness is more, but they have to take thickness 1 mm. They have to do machining maybe for 10 seconds. Even 10-second machining may take a lot of time. And then mechanistic models will develop because of this type of problem, and soft computing got very much importance. People started focused the attention. Okay, by neural network, I can predict that surface roughness and all these things. Clearly, this demonstrates that still there is a limitation in the FEM model. Otherwise, these techniques would not have emerged. In 2004, Atkins, they gave another type of model. He raised the fundamental question that he said that although Shah also has showed this type of thing, but he said that no, I have to take some energy for creating new surface. But it is not the chemical surface energy, he said, the way, because that is of course very small, as Shah has showed. It is some type of, you can say, in a way, I would say that it is like a fitting parameter. Okay, that means it gives the nice results with that. And this is what in 2000s, after 2000, gradually and nowadays, people are doing molecular dynamics simulations and crystal plasticity finite element methods. Again, there are limitations because of huge computational time. So people are doing this. There are simulation modeling, but don't think that you will be able to model unless you take into help of other things also. That means other supporting methods. You cannot model your huge that problem. They are only doing toy problems. even molecular, they are talking in terms of micron. I said that, okay, can we do a feed of 0.1 millimeter per this one? My collaborator, he said, no, sir, it's not possible. We can do only in micron. Okay. So what happens that there is a scope for, of course, the multi-scale models. Okay. That means you can do some portion by, say, let us say crystal plasticity, but wherever possible, then you can take that data and then you do the bulk modeling by traditional ways. Okay, so we are nowadays, my student, he is doing friction stir welding modeling by in DeFahm using Lagrangian formulation, adaptive remeshing, and he has taken coupled temperature displacement analysis. Now he has mentioned that properties, element size, and material, and all those type of things you have to take very carefully. He has to take. If he takes material tool as a rigid body, then he is able to reduce the time. Otherwise, tool is also, if you do very realistic simulation without any assumptions, then naturally the time will be enormous. So here, after doing that, we are doing that some simulations, and we are getting some parameters. In fact, he has given me some simulations. Maybe later on I can play, and he is showing these results of the deformation and then process parameter and this one. So quickly I will tell that even 3D printing simulations are also becoming very popular, and this is volume conserving model of 3D printing in Loughborough University, where my collaborator Dr. Anish Rai and Vadim is there. We keep visiting, so that's how this one. And this myself and Anish were trying to do some work together using these tools, molecular dynamics and crystal plasticity, this one. So in molecular dynamics, basically, it is actually a very versatile simulation technique. I would like that many young researchers should take up this topic, and they can model, because now it is of course picking up. But as I said, that it is still at toy problem stage here. But the advantage is that if you really are able to do proper molecular dynamics modeling, then of course you need not worry about lot of physics. Maybe you don't worry about von Mises criteria, it will automatically come. You don't worry about that whether it is steel, aluminum, that it can be a generic type of model. That type of thing is possible. So for each atom, they use that if mi into a, say Newton's law, they assume that we are going to that scale. We are still not going to quantum mechanics stage. We are only telling that molecular level, that these are the forces on the atom, and then you have to choose a potential. Forces on the atom can be obtained by choosing a potential function. Now here there is a point that you integration schemes are of course that quite reasonable, that you can these are well established, but potential function, which potential function should be used, still there is a debate on that and this one. On the other hand, in crystal plasticity FEM, you will make certain assumptions and you will study the behavior of crystal. So you don't go that down. Molecular, it is something in between. You can say something like meso scale, that we are having micro, then we are having meso, and then we go to micro size, and then we have large, that how the deformation is taking place. And I will not go to this one, that we assume that there is a result shear stress on some directions and all those, and there is a hardening law. But then we just show that some case studies, that suppose you have cutting tool of diamond, and you are cutting the silicon, and you are giving very less deformation, and then you are doing nanometric cutting basically, and then you are doing by molecular dynamics and by crystal plasticity both, and you are observing that. Okay, so you single crystal, if you do by single plastic FEM, single plastic model can be incorporated in finite element method, and molecular dynamics method will be separate, and CPM can be combined with FEM. So you get a lot of these results, and then we okay, and then you can get the chip morphology, all that type of details you can get. You can study the behavior. but you don't try to find out, suppose you say that what is the total force, etc. That if you try to model this way, then it will take a lot of computational time. So it is justified only in the effort is justified where there is a nanometric cutting, where traditional theories are failing. And this is a brief comparison, just I am putting that in this last slide, and after that I can show you some simulations little bit. That molecular dynamics is useful when underlying deformation mechanism not well understood. I don't know the behavior, so therefore I am just going at molecular, whether Tresca criteria is valid or Rankine theory is valid, I can do that. Gives fundamental insight of the deformation processes, no prior knowledge of system evolution required, increased complexity of the potential and computational cost for multi-component system. So if you have multi-component system, lot of, and time scale and domain size are very limited. Nowadays, people are doing molecular dynamic simulation, but they are simulating 100 nanometers and for 1 nanosecond like that. Unrealistic strain rate they have to take, that 10 to the power 8 and something. If they do very slowly, then they cannot observe that, means it will take huge amount of time. So they have to assume that it is moving fast. So although they are doing machining simulation, but they are assuming that it is doing 10 to the power 8 per second. Crystal plasticity method is more efficient compared to molecular dynamics. Capability to model reasonable spatial and time domains. Reasonable means in between, not as the macro FEM. Various deformation modes can be modeled. Material with different crystal structures, HCP, etc. can be modeled. Deformation mode dependency are various parameters. Size can be are incorporated. Capability to investigate individual deformation mode, but it is a basically phenomenological material large method. That means you need lot of material large which have to be based on your empirical experiments. So it is basically using phenomenological models, and identification of deformation mode, etc. is needed. So therefore, what is the point is that you have to make a judicious choice that where to use which process. Okay. So with this, that I'll say this one, and I just want to show some simulations like this one, which generally have to take huge. Now here I am showing friction still spot welding. Now this mesh, you see the mesh distortion and how this process is taking place, and then it is moving, and you are seeing that material is flowing, so there is no pinhole left behind. Pinhole will come only when it comes this one, but only you simulated, and if you made a video file of this size, it is actually having about 4 MB. So that's what I am telling, that now a lot of effort. This is again friction still welding. It is showing some phenomena, and this is doing that here simulation, and it is giving some result. And then after that, here I am going, let us say, okay, this is, if we go to this one, if we go to autofrettage process. Autofrettage process also physics, it is simulating. You are putting the pressure and it is producing the stresses. So you can see the stresses, you can get a lot of information. And then finally, here you are getting residual stresses. So residual stresses also shown, that compressive and tensile. And then this one, it is showing hoop stresses, how they are changing loading and unloading. So that's how that all these type of phenomena you can study visually. Okay. So then if I go to this one, let us say laser bending. Okay. Laser bending. Okay. This I can't. Okay. I have to change to this one. Open with VLC media player. Okay. Yeah. So it is like that. See, now scanning is taking place, laser beam is going, temperature is going, and simultaneously it is bending. So sometimes we understood that how the bending behavior is taking place. Somebody in a seminar, when I presented this, and somebody thought that when I am heating this way, that it may bend this side, other side will not, because obviously he was not paying attention to continuum. But such type of things you can demonstrate, that even if you are heating here, whole sheet is getting bent. Of course, there is some distortion also. So all these final details can come, and we can we have compared it with this one also. Now this is also, let me just open it. Okay, open with yes, VLC media player. Okay, yes. Now here, yes, yeah, yes, this is actually a forging problem. We are compressing. Now you see that although I should have shown like a punch, if I make a punch type of thing and I miss, naturally that it will take lot of computational time. So I made it like a cell on the top. That tool is like a cell, but it is rigid, and then it is giving displacement. So if you want to make it visually very attractive, then other part has to be done outside the FEM packages. That means outside the package if you take, and then of course you can show that, you know, there is a tool and something like that. Always you do not. So this is also a type of multi-scale modeling. That means you always you don't do the same thing. Similarly, crystal plasticity can you use some behavior at one spot, but later on at other places the forces etc. you have to find out by traditional ways. That is why I started basically starting from the SRAP method, and I went up to that molecular dynamic simulation. And my idea is that nothing should be thrown away, no knowledge should be thrown away. Of course, and there are challenges associated with this one. And but you naturally we can make use of all the techniques in a very judicious way, and depending on the context, and then we can produce very good results, and we can achieve the task of digital manufacturing, and even we can make the digital twins of our machines, which can be very useful, and it will be a big contribution to Industry 4.0 from the simulation community. Okay, thank you very much. So if there are questions, then I can take some questions. Okay. Yes. Yes. So if there are questions, then I can.
Yeah, sir. There are few questions.
Okay.
And
yeah.
There are many questions, in fact.
Yes. But some of them are like that. Will we be getting PDFs? It will be like that. These type of things. So that you decide. If you say, then of course I leave it to you. What is spurious pressure? Say, for example, somebody said, okay, spurious pressure and even spurious shear strain in FEM you get that, which means that actually it is not real, but it is coming artificially due to your modeling. That is called spurious. So spurious pressure is not actual. Actually, you should not be getting that much pressure, but you are getting it because of this one. Okay. So what is why? Because suppose actual material has got infinite degree of freedom, but in finite element you have got some nodes. So in one element you say there are only 20 degrees. It has to go in this way. So you are putting artificial constraints, and that is why you are getting some spurious things. Okay. So okay. Any other? Can you read those questions if you want?
Somebody has also asked whether laser forming can be applicable for polymers.
Yes. For some type of polymers also, laser forming can be done, and it is you have to adjust the parameters. And in fact, nowadays femtosecond laser is becoming very popular, in which that their pulse will be of the order of 10 to the power minus 15 second time, and it can there will be non-Fourier heat conduction. So there may not be any heating effect at all. So there are things. Okay, that means polymer, this one is also possible. Like metal forming, we can do polymer processing also by means of lasers. Okay. In fact, my colleagues in the physics department, I don't have much idea about that, but they are actually trying to do research in the physics department that by laser they are trying to produce refrigerating effect. That means cooling. So I said that how it is laser is doing only heating. How you are doing that? Then they explained me something that at non-Fourier heat conduction stage, and when the phenomena is very fast, then actually there is a opposite effect encountered, and there will be actually cooling also. So it is. So I think that scope is wide open to do research in the laser area actually.
So one more question, sir. Dr. Anand NS has asked, what is the basic parameters required for modeling extrusion of solids and hollow profiles of aluminum alloys? Since you are expert in the metal forming, I would like to ask these questions also.
Okay. Basic parameters for aluminum, whether it is hollow or solid. Essentially, as I have said, that you need basic large, like equilibrium equations are etc. are common to everything. You are assuming that it is continuum. Only thing, but material behavior will be different. So what happens that you need to understand the material behavior. Your typical aluminum alloy follows which type of material model. That is very important. Then you need to get thermal parameters also you need to get if you want to do that proper thermal modeling. And then if you need to get that any metallurgical information about that how will be the grain growth and all those type of things if you want to use this one. So all this information has to be there, and then you can model in this different way. Sometimes we don't have many informations, so we follow the inverse approach. Like even in the laser one, if at high temperature I was not clear about what is the absorptivity, what will be this one, we use different type of coating materials. But then initially I did it by later on, I found it in physics department, but in the beginning I did in inverse way. Inverse way means by that in FEM we adjust, by simulation we adjust that which results matches with that. So simulation becomes very handy in that type of situation, that you assume that this is the behavior. So parameter means that you have to take that thermal model, and it means thermal parameters, and of course the information about its yield strength, its hardening behavior, its strain rate dependency, all those things are needed. Okay, yes.
One more question from KIT University, Dr. S.P. Kar is asking whether in the numerical modeling of laser, the source is used as a point source or as a heat flux, or as a equation. You write an equation to model the source.
Yes.
What I understand from the
very good question. Yes, so we used Gaussian heat source, because if you make the point assumption, it will not be very correct actually. Most of the analytical models make the point assumption, but here the Gaussian model is very much useful. So which can be easily done by FEM actually. Even in the commercial packages also, it is possible to give the that whole profile, and it can do that way. There is a way to do that. Okay, so it has to be Gaussian one.
So one of our valued viewers, Dr. Subhash Ganguly, has asked, what would be the right approach to hybridize the classical methods such as MD and CPFEM, etc. With AIs, artificial intelligence, in particular applications?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It is.
What is the right approach? How to hybridize?
Yes.
The classical methods.
And right approach will be that first identify our objectives, that actually what we need and how much information is already available with us. Suppose we don't know anything about some material. We are planning to develop it something. It is not existing. We cannot do any experiments. Then molecular dynamics may provide some solution, and maybe you have to do only molecular dynamic simulation. But suppose we have some information available, and we can then combine the crystal plasticity model also. And then what happens that if we can understand, like I give an example that how you can hybridize, make hybrid models. Suppose friction behavior. I don't know that how to take into account, and I know that friction comes because a lot of asperities there are on the surface. Lot of asperities are there, ups and downs. So what I did, I took a small piece and I understood the asperity behavior. And after I have understood the asperities deformation behavior, then I got that what is the typical mu, and that I give input into my bulk model. So in a way, that I am under, and I have seen such type of modeling approach also, that they are trying to find out that only strain distribution. They are not trying to find out the forces. and using that strain distribution, they fitted in an analytical model. So later task was done by analytical model. So that means the approach is like this, that you do the precise things which cannot be done. Like upper bound method cannot do the stress distribution. So naturally it is okay. But if by finite element you can get stress distribution, and that you give input to a upper bound, and rest of the calculation you do that. So it's an art, but of course it can be broad guidelines are like that. You have to move like this, okay? And neural networks, etc. So that you can do that. Combined with that, you take a lot of data, and then for online use, if you want to do control system, then you take the data from FEM analysis and then generate an expert system, and that can be used online in the control system. Okay, so that way it has to be done. So you have to see what is the purpose and what is this one, what is available with us. Okay, yes. So,
Professor Dikshit Partho here.
yes.
At the outset, we convey our thanks to you. The most important thing is that nowadays we have different models, different tools for solving different problems. But with my little experience, I often find that these are often used misleadingly.
Yes.
I mean, we need to know our purpose and capability of tool.
Yes.
Then only you can go for right application. Particularly for that, one need to have domain knowledge.
Yes.
Without having domain knowledge, application of modeling and simulation often are misleading.
Yes.
So at least, I mean, if who have followed your lecture, they now understand that you need to have adequate domain knowledge. You need to identify the capability of the model and your purpose, the particular solution you are looking for, and you need to apply individual model either standalone or in a hybrid framework appropriately. So this coverage, I believe, will convey this message to the scholars who are working in this particular domain. Sir, we had about 250 participants consistently in your lecture.
Yes.
So I believe your lecture will enlighten them and motivate them to use different modeling tools and algorithms for advancement of manufacturing technology as a whole. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
On the behalf of organizers committee, I thank Professor Dikshit for his illuminating lecture on domain knowledge, including FEM, artificial intelligence, and atomistic modeling, and the hybrid approaches. And I also thanks all the participants. We are sorry we could not take all the questions, but still the lecture, whatever in 1.5 hours is delivered. We will also reply the questions because I am noting all the questions and we will reply to them so on behalf of Professor Dikshit in consultation with him. So I thank you the speaker and all the participants. Thank you. We end here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I can now leave the meeting. Okay. Fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes. So good.
ठीक है, खत्म ना?
Next lecture is